Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing my January wrap-up. Alright guys, so I failed spectacularly when it came to my January TBR. I think I read 3 out of the 10 books that I was supposed to read in January, but I actually ended up having a really good reading month. I really kind of embraced mood reading, so there is a mix of both fantasy romance and dark romance in this wrap-up, and also my overall thoughts on Onyx Storm. So I will say my spoiler-free and then spoiler-filled thoughts. Now I will put a spoiler warning on the screen so you guys don't have to worry. I will definitely make sure to notify you guys when I start talking spoilers, but I have a lot of mixed feelings on Onyx Storm, and I'm very excited just to chat about them with you. Now, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about the books I read in January. So starting off with the Legend of Thezmarr read-along that is taking place over on my Patreon, we are up to the 3rd book in the series, which is Fate and Furies. If I'm going to be completely honest, I just finished this book right before I sat down to film this video, and oh my gosh, this is my favorite in the series by far, and I feel like that might be an unpopular opinion because not that much, well, actually, a lot happens in this book. I can't really go into spoilers. If you're unfamiliar with the Legend of Thezmarr, just very briefly, we are following Althea, and she lives in this community where women are no longer allowed to wield weapons, but she wants to become a warrior of legend to protect her people. So she has been training in secret, and one day she's discovered by Wilder, who is a warrior, and he wants to turn her in, but ends up having to become her mentor, and now she is trying to train in order to go through these trials that would allow her to eventually become what she has always dreamed of and protect her people and the people that are close to her. And this series is phenomenal. It is now one of my favorite fantasy romance series of all time. Everything about it, the pacing, the found family, the main character, and I think that's why I loved this book so much. She really comes into her own in this book, and she embraces her power, and I just love her. There is a line towards the end of the book that I honestly want tattooed. Like, it might be not my next tattoo, because if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, my husband has agreed he will get an Eagles tattoo with me. But the one after that, I want it to be a line from this book. It was so powerful. Like, I got goosebumps. So overall, I am loving this series. We still have one more book left, and then we're going to move on to another fantasy romance series over on my Patreon. But I'm going to be so sad once this series is finished. And next up was my Patreon book club book for January. Real quick, if you're unfamiliar with my Patreon, every month my Patreons get to choose from 3 different books. Once a winner is selected, I make an exclusive Patreon graphic, and then I add the book to the Discord where we get to discuss the book and then have a live show at the end of the month. So in January, my patrons chose The Crown of Oaths and Curses by Bree. And I had been wanting to read this book for so long, but there was no audiobook available, and the audiobook finally dropped last month. Now, I have a lot of mixed feelings about this book. I will start by saying I did end up giving this 4.5 stars, so I did enjoy it. If you're unfamiliar with the plot, we're essentially following, it's a dual POV story following Soren, who is the savage king of the High Fae, but he's not technically king yet. He has to marry his fate's blessed mate in order to take the throne. Now, his mate happens to be Rook, who is a enemy witch who has been staying in like a separate area away from this Fae king, although she knows that their fates are intertwined, and one day she has to return to her original home that is now just undergone a complete siege, and her people are hunted, and it's just a terrible place for her to be. So she travels back because she knows her destiny, and is immediately captured by her soon-to-be husband, thrown into a cell, and he treats her terribly. I have never hated an MMC as much as I hate Soren. I said some things about it in my Instagram. You can check there because I feel like the algorithm didn't like what I said. But overall, Soren is my least favorite MMC of any character I have ever read. He is so frustrating. He can't see reason, and he drives me insane. But I loved Rook so much. She is such a fierce character. I also really love a witchy fantasy. But once again, I don't feel like this was a romance. It's definitely leading towards an enemies to lovers romance, but this book in particular, although you can definitely tell we're setting it up, there is no romance whatsoever. These two people loathe each other. They threaten each other's like lives so many times throughout this book, and not in like a kidding kind of way, like a real, if you step out of line, I will kill you 100%. So like, just go in knowing that. Also, I had some issues with the pacing where I felt like some parts dragged, although I do think the world was very well developed and I found a lot of it very interesting. Highly recommend the audiobook. There are certain voices in the Fates that are honestly so eerie and so well done, and I really think they helped like enhance this story. So definitely check out the audio if you're an audiobook lover. But overall, I did enjoy this, and I'm very curious to read book 2. Hopefully the audiobook releases soon. And next up, I reread Iron Flame in preparation for Onyx Storm. I also have a full recap of Iron Flame that I will leave in the cards and in the description if you don't want to go back and do a reread before jumping in to the next book. Now, I will say the first time I read Onyx Storm, I think I ended up giving it a 3-star. On my reread, I upped it to a 3.5. I feel like this is a book that I just enjoyed a lot more on my reread, knowing things that you find out at the end of this book. It just kind of changed the experience for me for the better. So if you're unfamiliar with Fourth Wing in general or following Violet Sorrengail, when she comes of age, she believes she is going to become a scribe. Instead, her mother tells her she's going to become a dragon rider. So she then has to go to Bathscythe War College to try to stay alive long enough to bond with a dragon, gain magical abilities, and help defend her people. So once again, this one did feel very much like a filler book. I did also find out while I was doing my recap video, this was actually originally 2 books that was condensed down into 1, which makes a lot of sense because there are parts of this book that I feel like the book could have finished there and then we just kept going. So I'm very interested to see like where that book cutoff would have been. But overall, I did really enjoy this. That being said, let's get into Onyx Storm. But first, before we get into Onyx Storm, I do have a really funny story of me trying to get my Target edition. And if you have no interest in this story, no worries, timestamps down below. You can skip right into my discussion of the book. But anyway, I was able to wake up at 3 a.m., which was absolute hell. And then I was able to secure a Target exclusive edition, which I was really excited for. But I know I've had horrible luck when it comes to having books delivered to me. They normally come damaged, and I knew I had enough friends that if I managed to get 2 copies, I would just give it to one of my friends, which is what I do still plan on doing. I still have to ship it out. But that copy did arrive unbelievably damaged. Like both sides, I will insert a picture if I still have it. Both sides of the dust jacket were like completely levitating, and I had no idea how to stop it. So it seems like a few people had that issue. Anyway, I was afraid that was going to happen, so I decided to wake up super early. Actually, I had to wake up super early for my job anyway, so after I finished my job around 7:10, I headed over to Target. Luckily, Target is very close to me, so I got there at 7:30. There was a line already at 7:30, and I didn't think there was going to be anybody at this Target. It has the smallest of book sections, and I honestly was like, they're not waiting for Onyx Storm. Of course they were. What else would they be doing there? So it's freezing, mind you. It's like so cold. I'm in leggings, I'm in slippers, and just like a hoodie because I didn't think I would be out waiting. Go out, waiting with everyone else. We're all really cold. Turns out most of us were in education or had worked in education. There were 2 teachers that actually took the day off in order to get these books, which I thought was really fun. So anyway, we're all just talking and strategizing, and I have seen a lot of horror stories about the Target thing, and I definitely think it was mismanaged. I will say, though, I had a really fun time that morning, just meeting all of the readers in my area, and we were talking about, like, the fastest way we thought we'd get through Target, and it was just a really cool experience, a bunch of strangers all just talking about this book. So I had fun. But anyway, we get there, and this woman, and there's probably 20 of us at this point. I'm within the first 5 people or 6 people, and they come out and they say they don't have a lot of editions. They didn't tell us how many they had, and they open the doors. I wasn't expecting to run. Everyone took off, and I was like, I'm a rule follower, so I was like, I really don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to run. So I'm like speed walking my way And as I'm speed walking, I end up hitting a thing of snow because it had been snowing the night before. I completely just ate it onto the floor. It was so embarrassing. I wanted to cry. I was ready just to get up and leave at that point because I thought I just embarrassed myself. Then this lady, she was so sweet. She had been the one I was talking with earlier. She was a teacher, and her 2 kids had managed to get in front of everybody because they went diagonally through the store and grabbed like 6 copies. I don't know how many there were, but grabbed the copies, and she was passing them out. So she sees me on the floor and she was like, "Do you want one?" So I got my copy, and I thought that was the sweetest thing ever. And it was fun. So overall, that is my Target experience of trying to get a Target exclusive edition. It was interesting, but once again, I did have fun. So I just thought that was a cute story that I wanted to share. All right, so moving into my spoiler-free thoughts for Onyx Storm. I will say I'm giving this a 3.5. It might end up changing. When I first finished this book, I gave it a 3, and I was seriously considering 2.5. But now, having discussed this book with some of my friends and some things that I possibly missed and different theories, I think I will give it a 3.5. The humor and certain characters is really what saved this book for me. Now, the things I did not enjoy with this book, I definitely think the pacing could have been improved. There was a lot of times I put this book down and had no desire to pick it back up. I had originally believed I was going to finish this book in a day. I was just going to binge the entire thing. And it took me about 2.5 days, and that was because I just didn't feel like reading. So that was a bit of a letdown. I also will say I was very confused in the beginning, and I'm going to get into that in the spoiler section. Not exactly sure if it's a spoiler, but just to be safe. And I think I know why I was very confused. And remember, I had just read Iron Flame like a week before I read this, and I did an entire recap video, and I research a lot for those recap videos. So I feel like I shouldn't have been super confused going into this. And I was. There was very hard to talk without spoilers. So I think we are going to go into the spoiler section. But overall, I will 100% be continuing this series. I still really love the characters, especially the dragons, and I am very interested to see where this story is headed. But yeah, this was a little bit of a letdown for me, but still a very enjoyable series overall. Okay, let's talk spoilers for Onyx Storm. Like I said previously, I felt like the very beginning of this was very confusing because I didn't know who half of the characters were. And I actually saw a TikTok, or one of my friends sent me a TikTok that was saying, if you pay attention in Iron Flame, 90% of the time, Violet is saying, I don't want to know the freshmen or the underclassmen because they're going to die. So she doesn't really spend a lot of time describing them or really fleshing them out to us as the reader. So then when we get into this book and she is just name dropping them like we are supposed to know them, I had no idea who half of these characters were. I knew they had been mentioned, I just didn't remember what their signets were, who their dragons were, how they related. So I kind of wish in Iron Flame we just spent a little bit more time with the characters that were going to play a very big role in this book. That was one of my biggest gripes, and I'm sure there are people that feel differently, so please, if you feel differently, reading is subjective. This is just how I felt throughout this book. I also felt like it was very choppy in the pacing. We were really just going from one place to another, which sometimes I do enjoy, and I think sometimes it was executed very, very well. Once we got to a certain island where Xaden's mother, that entire thing, once we got there, from then on, I felt like the pacing really picked up, and I was much more invested in the story, and I think then I just binged from there. But it took a really long time to get there. I also have been talking to some of my friends about this. It almost feels like Rebecca Yarros knew she had already gotten approved to have her novels adapted into a TV show. Some of the plot points in this and some of the comedic moments and cliffhangers felt like they were very much written for a television show or like an hour-long show. Like you could literally tell when a cliffhanger was coming and that would be the end of an episode. So I found that, and now that I've pointed it out to a few other people, some people agree with me, some people think I'm totally off base, which is totally okay. But that's what I found. I just felt like the writing style was very different from Fourth Wing, and I absolutely loved Fourth Wing. I know it's not everybody's favorite, but I really enjoyed that book. So I just, also some characters, I feel like their personalities didn't change, but they got dramatically exaggerated, if that makes sense. Like, one character that was like a class clown type character, I feel like it really jumped up in this book, and things like that. I just feel like personalities really became a lot bigger, which is another reason why I think she had already like knew that this was going to be adapted into a TV show. But I did absolutely love the dragons. I did think some things were a little bit predictable, but I did not see everything that was going to go on with Indarna. Now, the ending of this book. My issue is amnesia trope is my least favorite trope on the face of the earth. I will DNF books if I find out it's an amnesia trope. I don't know what it is about it. It's just one of my least favorite tropes, and I very rarely rate a book high that features that. I don't love having more information than the character that I am reading or the POV. It's just a me thing. I really love being on the same level as my character. So when I feel like I know more of what's going on than her, it kind of drives me a little bit crazy. And I know that's probably not going to be the case for the next book in this, because Violet is just as clueless as the rest of us. But, or everyone is just as clueless as Violet is at this point. But either way, I am interested to see where the story goes. I felt like I'm very confused with certain aspects. That whole last ending of this, I'm sorry, this is totally turning into a rant, and I did not mean it to be. But the entire ending of the book, it was very fast-paced, which I enjoyed. But the POV hopping felt very strange, because up until that point, I feel like that wasn't being done. I was really excited that we got Rhiannon's POV and Imogen's POV, but I feel like the big death at the end of this was a character that I wasn't super connected with. So I felt bad for Imogen and the other characters for losing this person, but I really would have liked an emotional like gut punch, more so than we got towards the end. Like, there's a character that they kind of hint might be about to die. I thought that would have been devastating. I'm not wishing that happened, but I feel like that would have had more of an impact than the one that did end up happening. Also, I have a lot of questions regarding a certain prince's signet and why he has to present information the way he presents it instead of being a little bit more straightforward, but we might find all of that out in the next book. So I'm also trying to hold some of my criticism, because I feel like some of the things that I find were not explained well might have been done on purpose, and they might explore it more in the next book. Obviously, we don't know who the big betrayer is. I have a couple guesses, which it's changed. They both start with a B, though. Don't let me know down in the comments, because it's a total spoiler, but I'll figure out a way for you guys to let me know what you think, because, yeah, I've heard a lot of different possibilities for the Great Betrayer, and yeah, I have two that I'm like pretty sure of. But I will say Broccoli was by far one of my favorite characters in this. I also really enjoyed Riddick, but once again, I just had slightly higher hopes for this book. Overall, I will still be continuing it, and I do have a live show taking place on February 16th with a bunch of other booktubers, and we're all going to discuss the book. It should be really fun, because I know some of us really loved it, others not so much. And then I will be also going on a live show on Laura A. Blake's channel on February 6th. I'll leave all the information down in the description below, and we are just going to discuss the book. So it should be really fun. Let me know, what did you guys think? And I can't wait for these live shows. And moving into dark romance, we have my newest obsession, God of Malice. This is the first book in the Legacy of the Gods series by Rina Kent, and it took everything in me not to just throw away my TBR and binge this entire series after finishing this first book. Now, I will say, this is one of the darkest books I have ever read. Please check the trigger warnings. At the beginning of this book, there is a very upsetting scene. So, like, this book off the bat just starts off very dark. So know what you're getting into, but the MMC in this is perfection. He is a psychopath, and I just love him so much. He is a new favorite book boyfriend. So if you're unfamiliar with the plot, this is a new adult dark romance. It is set in college, and we are following Killian. And Killian is a born psychopath, but he has learned how to mask, and that's how he's gotten by in life. And one day he ends up seeing Glyndon, who is our other POV character, in a very vulnerable moment and situation, and he decides to take advantage of that. And then after their encounter, he becomes obsessed with her, and it's their romance, and I loved it So much. So I know next month in February is technically like fantasy romance February. So I only plan on reading fantasy romance book, but I think I am going to try to squeeze the second book of the series in February just because I need to know what happens. And I love these characters. So let me know if you read the series. What do you think? I can't wait to continue. And next up, I binged the first two books in the King series by T.M. Frazier. So we have King, and then we also have Tyrant. Now, I will say this series is incredibly underhyped. I had no idea that this series existed. I ended up seeing a TikToker talk about it, and it sounded interesting, and oh my gosh, this was so good. So if you like motorcycle club romances, I think you would really enjoy this. In this story, we are following Doe, and Doe is a young woman that woke up in a hospital one day with no idea who she is, what her identity was, where she came from, so she was labeled as a Jane Doe. So she now is working on the streets with a friend just trying to get by, and her friend suggests that they go to a motorcycle club party where they would hopefully meet a motorcycle rider and become one of their old ladies, and that way they would offer them protection, they wouldn't have to be on the streets. So Doe reluctantly agrees, goes to this party, where her friend then tries robbing the house. Now her friend is able to get away, but Doe is captured by King. Now King is the owner of this house. He was recently released from jail, and he tells Doe she is not going anywhere. She is officially his until he gets his money back. And the story goes from there. I feel like the side characters in this were written so well. There's also a really good amount of humor, and the spice was just perfection. So I am very excited to read more books by this author, but once again, incredibly underhyped. So if you like motorcycle club romances, please check this out. And I was feeling a little slumpy in the beginning of January, so I decided to pick up a taboo romance because those are some of my favorite to read. So I saw Gratify kind of floating around Bookstagram, and I decided to give the audio a try. Oh my gosh, one, I absolutely love this. Two, it was way more taboo than I was expecting. So this is a parents, best friend, ex-boyfriend's dad, godfather romance, which that's just a lot. There was a lot that was covered here, but overall, I thought it was a very good story. We are following Andromeda, and at the very beginning of this book, she finds out that her boyfriend is cheating on her. So she's kind of grappling with now being single. She really thought she was going to marry this boy because it was her parents' best friend's son, so they'd all kind of grown up together. So then shortly after that, her parents end up dying in a very upsetting way. So Andromeda is now staying by herself, and she's just not doing well mentally. So she ends up moving in with her godfather, who happens to be her ex-boyfriend's father. And the story progresses from there, and I think you guys can figure out what goes down. But once again, I did really enjoy this. I loved Andromeda and Atlas's romance and their relationship. There were some things I think could have been handled a little bit better, but overall, I love taboo romances or age gap romances that allow the FMC to have time to really decide if this is what's right for her, and this book did do that, so I did appreciate that. But overall, I ended up giving this 4 stars, really enjoyed it. So if you are looking for a taboo dark romance or just taboo romance, definitely check this out. And last up is actually a memoir. So I don't read a ton of memoirs these days, but back in college, I used to love them. So The Glass Castle and Educated are 2 of my favorites. But I ended up reading The House of My Mother by Ruby Franke. So to give you a bit of a backstory, back during the lockdown, I was watching a ton of YouTube, and I used to follow some families, and one of them was the Franke family. I watched 8 Passengers, and I watched them for a few months until they started turning towards more beliefs that I don't follow as much, so I kind of stopped watching. And then a few years ago, I saw that Ruby Franke was arrested, and I was kind of curious what happened, and it was very shocking and so upsetting. So when I found out that Shari Franke, the daughter, was coming out with a book, I decided to give it a shot and kind of see what her life was like. And it was honestly heartbreaking to see everything that she went through. And I'm really interested to see what's going to happen when more children of content creators end up coming forward and sharing their experiences, because I feel like that is something we are going to see a lot of in the future. But it was a heartbreaking read, but definitely worth picking up. Also, if you check out the audiobook, Shari herself actually narrates it, which I thought was really, really enjoyable. It really helped make it feel like you were living these experiences with her. So worth checking out. It is a bit of an upsetting read, but definitely one of the better memoirs I've read recently. Alright guys, those are all the books I read in January. Please let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of the books I mentioned, and let me know what was your top read of last month. And I'd like to say a special thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Kat, Leslie, Lotta, Kylie, and Jess. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!